2023, a year that, had fate not had other plans, would have ended up being a year of finality for the Death Battle community. Not only had several of its most requested matchups finally gotten done, but it was also the final year of RTX and eventually the final year of RoosterTeeth as a whole. I was fortunate enough to have the chance to go to it, thankfully, and met some of my online friends in the community there. And I find it quite fitting that 2023's Death Battle season ended up being the last one to be a blanket number. So, with the first year of the indie era having wrapped up, I think it's time I finally tackle this season the way I've done almost every other season beforehand. So, enough dilly-dallying. This is Wolf's Top 16 Season 10 Death Battle Episodes. A shame that after a season of no bad episodes, we got back to form with this year.
Victory comes with no certain satisfaction. I may never know why we were made to fight, if violence is ever truly justified. But perhaps there is something worthy in the battle. Myria. Something beyond my understanding.
Look, I get that these two characters aren't normally ones to go into full-blown violence unless necessary, and under most circumstances, I probably would love this kind of video. And I will give them credit, they tried to get it to work. And it almost did. Almost. Unfortunately, there are too many flaws for me to ignore. First off, the animation just feels really bland. Like, they're doing stuff, sure, and there are cool moments, but it feels like nothing's going on in the fight, even while there's things going on. It's the action equivalent of the insult of someone talking and yet having nothing to say. I also don't think that there are that many good jokes in this episode. Some interesting commentary, I'll give it that. I don't think this episode is as bad as the worst episodes of previous seasons, admittedly. The voice acting is pretty good, especially with Cameron Nicod sounding perfectly like Carl Lumley's Martian Manhunter from the DCAU, while Paul Guyette does a good job voicing Silver Surfer. Also, the fact that they referenced the NES game with the infamous Game Over screen is great. I was willing to give this episode at least a meh rating, if it weren't for the fact that Mind Over Matter was yet another instance of good backing track, bad solo track. Even then, it still wasn't really all that interesting at parts as a backing track, and it was just kinda there. That was, unfortunately, all that was needed to drag this episode down to bad. A shame, really, but at least it can only go up from here. You know, it's amazing how much of a difference a couple of years makes.
Wait a minute. Distance, 35 meters. Altitude, 45, 40, now.
I remember when the community went absolutely nutso about this episode, but not in a good way. For those who don't remember, or you've selectively forgotten about what happened, there was a ton of controversy about this episode being made in the first place, and some people even made some comments about not liking the idea of this fight in general, some even putting down a certain magical index despite how popular it is. I'm not here to get into that though. Instead, I'll get into how this episode is just kinda meh. The fight was just average in every regard. Change of Heart is just an okay song. The fight animation was kinda slow to get interesting. The writing was not great. Admittedly, I do think the actual dialogue from the characters is fine, and the voice acting is pretty good from both Giselle Fernandez and Finty Kelly. But that was unfortunately offset by any of the writing for Wiz and Boomstick, especially the kilowatts line that Boomstick was spouting repeatedly throughout the episode. It's just mediocre. But I'll give this episode credit for one thing, it apparently made the subreddit ship Killua and Misaka. That fact doesn't change how I feel about this episode, but I do think it's a silly and cute thing to note about this fight. Nothing else to say, really. You ever hear the saying, be careful what you wish for, you may just get it? I think I found the death battle equivalent of that.
You don't want to give me your power! Fine! I'll just take it!
Good idea. This world sure isn't perfect, but it's a lot better without you in it, asshole.
For the longest time, I always considered Cole vs. Alex as Schrodinger's death battle. Pretty much every season, whenever someone predicts what episodes we'll see in a season, at least one episode will be predicted to be Cole vs. Alex. Doesn't seem to even matter who, or if they want it to be, it's just gonna be there. And I'd always joke that the next episode will always be Cole vs. Alex until it's announced to not be. Well, we finally got that episode thanks to the champions, Cole. Was it worth it? Not really. I know the fight was originally meant to be from 2013, but it really feels like a fight from that time. And don't get me wrong, I'll happily go back and rewatch old episodes, even from season 1. But comparing this episode to the others around it, yeah, not great. It's mainly the animation and the non-fight writing. A lot of the animation moments are pretty jerky, the models moving very suddenly, kind of like the Praetorian 3D fights looked. But the writing for Wiz and Boomstick is also equally not great, especially with how Boomstick constantly compares the abilities that both Cole and Alex have to Shadow the Hedgehog, which gets old after a while. The only line of Wiz and Boomstick that I do enjoy was the ending part of Alex's rundown, since it feels like a more modern line. So then, why is this episode higher than Killua vs. Misaka? Well, two things. First is the actual lines for both Cole and Alex are absolutely perfect for both, and Paul Guyette and Kevin Rivera do a fantastic job voicing their respective characters. And second is Inhuman, a fantastic rap battle made by Brandon, Nathaniel Wolkstein, and, of course, Omega Sparks and Swats. I love how whenever a proper rap battle is needed for an original song, Sparks and Swats show up to take sides. They did it for Miles vs. Static, they did it for Black Adam vs. Apocalypse, and they do it here. And it makes the song pop off even more. But this might be the best one they've done so far. Hopefully we'll hear the two again sometime in the 2026 season. I'll admit, the song was almost enough to make this episode go into the good category. Unfortunately, there are just too many things holding this episode back to be anything more than meh for me. Four seasons in a row where the premiere's not bad? That must be a new record.
How? You can't be afraid to think big.
I remember liking this episode quite a lot when it first aired, but after some time it did slowly lose its impact. Don't get the wrong idea, it's still good, but a mix of later episodes coming out with better quality and looking at this episode a little more critically made this episode drop down in quality for me. Let's start with the positives. First, the episode is creative with its environments, which is obviously expected with two characters that can shrink. That's one of the things that makes creators have characters that can change sizes, particularly ones that can shrink in the first place. The voice acting's pretty good as well, with both Gavin Hammond and Chris Okawa doing good work as Hank and Ray respectively. And of course, there's the actual killing blow to Ray in the first place, probably one of the most brutal looking deaths they've ever done. It's also pure body horror, something we don't get a lot of for actual deaths in the show. However, where this episode really suffers is in its writing and music. Not actual size, it's just a meh song. One where it's pretty good as a backing track, but not that great on its own. And the writing is just okay. Nothing really stands out about it, for better or for worse. Though it definitely could have been worse, as the amount of size-changing puns they had were limited to just the opening. It's a good episode, and one I think is worth rewatching, even if it's a very small victory. Oh, God damn! I remember how much people disliked this idea.
I am not the daughter of a demon. I am a daughter of Azarath. Azarath Metrion Sympho! I'm home.
I mentioned before that Season 9 was probably the season when people really started getting upset at the Marvel vs. DC matchups, and I remember that this episode got plenty of people upset at it. Which I also find ironic because I remember someone telling me that they were upset with Raven's previous fight since they thought that her being in that fight was wasting her. Although I think that hate for this episode started to become toned down after it actually got released, which is the second time that happened this season. So what do I think of it? Well, it's pretty good. First things first, the animation is pretty smooth, and with characters who can do a lot, the fight itself flows pretty well. Corey's voice for Jean is great, and Kira returning as Raven showed off her acting range very well, just like with her fight against Twilight. The music, Forevermore, uses both the Teen Titans and X-Men animated series themes very well, while still sounding epic. The only thing about this episode that I'm not all that much of a fan of is the writing, which is just kinda okay. Besides the sudden pointing out of how Jean died a 16th time between the production of that episode beginning and its release, something I don't think was planned, there aren't really any moments that stand out in the writing itself. Although I will give some credit as both Phoenix and Raven have a single line that's just great. Nothing else to say, just a good episode. Well, look at what we have here. A joke episode that's ascended from the bottom of the list. Neat!
Stupid dogs! You made me look bad! What's her? Wow! Ow! Ow! Cut it out! Well, Muriel, I hate that stupid dog!
So, fun fact, this is actually the first joke episode since Season 3 to not be at the bottom of the list. And the first one since Season 2 that I consider to be a good episode. I'm sure some of you are surprised by this, given my reaction to previous joke episodes. So what exactly did this episode do differently for me to sing its praises? Well, first of all, the writing was actually pretty good. It managed to do a good job of being fun to watch, have some very good jokes, and still feel like an actual death battle episode. Were there jokes I didn't really like? Yeah, sure, but there were more jokes they did that I actually liked compared to ones that I didn't. I also really like how they managed to perfectly match the vibes of both the Scooby-Doo franchise and an episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog. Part of that is also the voice acting. While Billy Burson might normally be known for voicing Ringmaster, he did a pretty good job voicing both Scooby and Eustace perfectly. Same goes to Edward Bosco, who sounds so much like Marty Grabstein's voice for Courage that I would have thought it was him if I didn't know any better. Fun personal fact, about a year after this episode got released, I actually got to meet Marty at Rhode Island Comic Con. I even got a signed picture of Courage from him and took a picture with him. I didn't tell him about this episode, but that was because he had suffered a stroke earlier that year. But I'm getting off topic. Another thing I was quite fond of was Forever Terror Night, which sounds like an intense version of a typical song you'd hear in an actual Scooby-Doo chase song. It's great, and, in my opinion, the best original song of any joke episode they've done. Like I said, there are some jokes that don't exactly land, which is why I can't put this episode any higher or make it a great episode, but this is certainly a doggone good episode. Hard to believe this episode came out 10 years after the original. Man, how time flies! And God, I feel old now.
Huh?
Ah, darn it.
Almost had me there. That was actually pretty fun.
Yeah, it sure was. but I'll be stronger next time.
I look forward to it.
Let's go again.
You're on.
Honestly, I feel like this episode's in the middle ground for me when it comes to the 3 different versions of this fight that Death Battle has done. I think it's definitely much better than the second version, but the original is just such a classic episode that I don't feel like this is entirely able to top, all things considered. One thing it definitely succeeds at is the quality of the animation. The original Goku vs. Superman still looks neat, but this version looks a lot more high quality. That and the cell shading it has gives it a better look compared to the original. I also think that the voice acting is on par with the original. No offense to It's Just Some Random Guy or Masako X either, but I think Xander Mobius and Michael Kovac just do such a fantastic job with their respective roles, and they sound better in some ways. The research also feels like it goes a lot more in-depth with everything, and is definitely a sign of how far research has come since the original. The original required a lot of consulting with outside sources, while this one is 100% their own. Hell, the way they determined the winner is the same way they'd end up determining the winner nowadays, with looking at different categories. Add on to that the fact that Super is a pretty good song, and this is a solid episode all around. However, that doesn't mean it's necessarily perfect. The biggest problem in this one is probably the writing, mainly with how Goku and Superman are. Not to say they're badly written, or that they have bad lines, but sometimes it feels like they're a little out of character, especially Superman. He feels a little too much like he's written as a Dragon Ball character rather than himself. It's not bad, but it does feel a little jarring. Still, I can't say this is a bad episode by any means. Far from it. It's certainly a great episode. One could even say that it's, well, super.
We're having a blast. We've got the skid mode gunning. Aloha! We're having a blast. Mother!
Now, this one was certainly a fun episode. Where do I start? Well, let's start with the writing. This episode had some pretty solid writing overall, from the way they start the character rundowns, to the way Stitch and Rocket interact, to even the way the fight progresses. That also flows well into the animation, which looked really good. The way the environment is used is especially impressive, certainly for a space Hawaii setting. But even just Rocket's facial expressions as you see him both enjoying the fight and getting progressively more upset at how much of a pain Stitch is being to him are a pretty big highlight for me. Speaking of Rocket, that brings me to my next point. The voice acting is actually pretty good. Admittedly, Delton Ingles Sorrel didn't really need to do a lot to voice Stitch well, since most of his dialogue was just shouts and growls, but his performance sounds perfectly like Chris Sanders. However, you can't leave out Jeff Shine, who's already an incredibly prolific voice actor, but who sounded so much like Bradley Cooper's Rocket that you could have told me they got the actual voices for Stitch and Rocket for this fight, and I'd believe you. Also, props to Jailhouse Rocket, which is a pretty fun song in its own right. So, if I have all these things to praise about the episode, why is it only number 9 on a list of 16? Do I really need to say it? I guess I have to. Yes, this is that episode of the season. You know what I mean, right? The episode that is only lower on this list because I just like the other episodes more. However, this one is interesting because it's not just that. While I do have praise for this episode, it's also that the things that it does well, the rest of the entries just do better in pretty much every regard. Still a great episode, it's just the rest after this point have some space between themselves and this episode. You ever see the next time for a Death Battle episode and worry that regardless of who wins or loses, there will be controversy abound? Yeah, that's what I thought this episode was going to do.
Quite an impressive craft, Morty. You built it yourself?
I guess so.
Then you've got a bright future ahead. Don't be a cynic!
Morty, if you forget me, I'll haunt your ass.
Who the fuck are you?
I know that both Rick and Morty and Doctor Who have some of the more controversial fan bases out there, especially Rick and Morty, so seeing this episode made me very nervous. However, I'm glad that not only did this episode not seem to attract much controversy, if any, but it also was a great episode to watch. First and foremost, the animation looks fantastic, mixing both the normal animation style we see for hand-drawn fights, the 3D environments, especially inside the TARDIS, and Rick looking exactly like he does in his own show. Seriously, if you had told me they had actually gotten someone who worked on Rick and Morty to work on the animation for him, I'd believe you. Same thing with the voice acting, really. Brent Williams sounds perfectly as Rick, even if Liam's Morty isn't exactly perfect. But in this case, we have another voice actor who reprises a character they actually voiced, and gets credited properly with it, thanks to Elliot Crosley, since the look they went for with the Doctor in this case is very much meant to be David Tennant's version of the character. The writing is damn good in this one, and spot on for both characters, with Rick being far more aggressive in the way that he fights, while the Doctor is very defensive and is never actually attacking at any point. Hell, the fact that they even took the Doctor's "I don't want to go" line that was originally a heartbreaking line in its original context and turned it into a sign of badassery is just great. I'm also quite fond of Wubba Lubba Allons-y, which is a great song to listen to on its own. I do kinda wish we got to see more of their actual tech on display, but overall this was a great fight, and one that I'm glad was universally loved by the fans. While Season 10 did certainly fulfill a lot of highly requested episodes, I'm kinda glad we got a more original idea thrown into the mix.
Domain expansion. Unlimited void. Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one.
It's always interesting whenever two franchises get their first combatant at death battle at the same time, and this episode was certainly no exception. While I wasn't too aware of anything that really happens in Jujutsu Kaisen, I was at least familiar with Makima thanks to another YouTuber making a video about Chainsaw Man, so seeing her as the first combatant to enter from that series as opposed to someone like Denji or Power made me rather surprised, actually. The writing was pretty good, even if hearing Boomstick use modern slang like saying the word Riz is still kinda weird for me. The way the two characters were interacting was great, and honestly, I think the intro to this fight might have been my favorite of the entire season. I love the little things in this episode, like how the fight playing on the movie screen was Samurai Jack versus Afro Samurai, because Kaiji Tang played Jack in that episode, and is also the official voice actor for Gojo in JJK. Or how Makima uses weapons from a nearby shop to try and attack Gojo, and you can even see the shop she might have gotten them from. The voice acting was great. Of course, Johnny is going to do a great job voicing any character he plays, and Gojo is no exception, especially given that this is only the second character he's voiced to get a win. But really, Kelsey Jaffer shouldn't be forgotten about either, getting across Makima's personality extremely well. The fight was so fun to watch, too, and it wasn't too long or too short either. Who Wears the Crown was a solid song, too, though not as great as some of the other songs this season. Unfortunately, the rest of the episodes on this list just do that one or two extra things to get higher on the list, so yeah, this is that episode of the season that I usually cover. This is definitely one episode that they should be honored to have made. Oh hey look, it's the episode that a friend of mine worked on yet didn't get credited for.
You will die by my hand!
You fool!
Simians must kill them all.
So, a little behind the scenes stuff. Some of you might know that I work with the Gmod animation group here on YouTube known as the Pyromancers. Well, one of the members of that team, their co-leader Akuago, actually does a lot of porting work from models into Gmod and Source Filmmaker. Included in his library of things he's ported over includes the very Megatron model that Devil Artemis used for this episode. Granted, Aku didn't get credited for it, but those of us who are fans of his work know about this, so that's what's important. What really matters, though, in terms of this list, is how great this episode is. First things first, the voice acting is phenomenal in this one. Of course they were going to get Little Karibo to voice Frieza for this. Anybody else, and I think there would have been a riot about it. And yeah, his voice for Frieza is still as amazing as when we first heard it in DBZ Abridged. Meanwhile, Tom Schock did a great job voicing Megatron, even if this is the only combatant he's ever voiced in the series that lost their fight. The animation for this looks damn near flawless, with both characters being well choreographed, looking good, and really feeling like they were going back and forth on this. The only issue I have with it, and the biggest issue with the episode as a whole, is how long Frieza's transformation into Golden Frieza takes. I get they were trying to reference the Dragon Ball Super anime where he transforms, and it does look great, but it does feel a little unnecessarily long. Still great animation with fantastic music to boot. Seriously, Final Formers is a hype song for both, even if the individual track is a little bit on the short end. But still, I love how it got across what Ben wanted it to be, an evil version of Wings of Iron, essentially. However, for me, the writing is the thing that I love the most about this episode. Both characters are written so fantastically, and Megatron's monologue to Frieza as he readies the antimatter attack is one of the best lines I've ever heard in this entire show. If he had actually won after that, it would have been even better, though obviously that wasn't meant to be. The fight just had so many good things going for it, just not enough to make it into the top 5. Still, a fight this good certainly didn't leave any fans out in the cold. So, wait a minute. In a season where both Silver Surfer and Megatron got to be included, that can only mean...
You did it. You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
Finally, I have won. I've seen their power, bringer of chaos. Yet by my vigor thou hast much need. Witness the last fate that awaits you thus. For almighty Galactus must now feed.
You know, back when we all thought that the end of Rooster Teeth meant the end of Death Battle itself, it was kind of agreed upon that Galactus vs. Unicron being the last episode they made was poetic, even if we all would have wanted more. But even with the show returning, the fight is still great. Also, it's been brought to my attention that both this episode and Goku vs. Superman were both in my Season 5 list as yet another unexpected, unintentional prediction when I was making up episodes that we all thought might be the 100th episode back during Season 5's airing. Still, we've been waiting for this ever since they announced they were researching it all the way back in 2015?! They finally got around to it after 8 years?! Jeez, that's a long wait. Well, either way, this was awesome and certainly worth it. I love the writing in this one especially, with the interaction between Galactus and Unicron feeling like it made perfect sense. I also loved how the two started speaking in poetic rhyme near the end there, as it made the two feel a lot more intense as abstract, godlike beings compared to others that have godlike power in this series that have shown up. The music only helped, as All Consuming is such a beautifully powerful yet haunting song for both. It didn't need to have a ton of rock or to be super orchestral either to get that effect, which is surprising. And major shout out to Tiggs, whose voice lent to that haunting tone of the song. The fact that this episode was presented entirely in letterbox format also added to the intensity. This felt like a finale, either for the season or the show itself. which makes me wonder if the team for the show knew this would probably be the last episode they'd ever do, or at least they figured it would be. The animation is incredibly solid as well. There's not a lot of them actually doing something besides firing beams and stuff, but I chalk that up to the limited amount of things we see these two actually do, since they're not really combatants as much as they are sheer forces of death and destruction itself. However, there is a slight animation error, or perhaps a sound error, I guess you can call it, of Galactus' attack on Unicron's bigger size bouncing off, but the sound of that happening occurs right before it hits him.
Even gods will die.
That, combined with how little there is, make this episode just miss out on being in the fantastic rating. Though even with those issues, some of the most minor of flaws, the sheer intensity of this fight brought to all a gape within their maws. Witness now the fight that, in reality, almost brought about the end of the show. A fight of pure finality. So, remember how I said I went to the last ever RTX that they had? Well, while I was there, I got to attend the Death Battle panel, and while I might have unintentionally caused a little chaos whilst there, I did manage to see a preview of the episode that would premiere afterwards.
Liberated from hell. Find peace in the next life.
I'd like to remind people that I'm not really interested in how accurate a fight is, unless it's so egregiously bad that I can't think about the episode without thinking about it, or unless the research is a sign of improvement from previous seasons. With that out of the way, holy crap, is this fight a thrill! This might be one of the most somber and beautifully animated fights that they have ever done. Seriously, the animation looks so freaking great. Even the things that seem like they might be limitations of Source Filmmaker look, in hindsight, like how the two's power sets work, especially with Obito. The track for this song, fittingly named That's No Moon, is even more of a haunting track than All Consuming is, and almost feels like a eulogy for the men that Vader and Obito were in their past, and what they've lost along the way to becoming the monsters that they are. The mix of both the Star Wars sounding music, including the Duel of the Fates song, as well as what I'm calling Death Battle's Uchiha leitmotif from Dangerous Gaze and Hollow Dreams, is mixed together so well that it shows that Death Battle themes don't have to be intense in order to make for good tracks for the show. The writing for both characters is great too. You can always tell just how good an episode is when you can look at the two characters' interactions and say, yeah, I believe that's how they'd react. However, the highlight in my opinion goes out to the voice acting. Jason Marnocha did such a good job voicing Vader and definitely nailed the performance for him, even if characters he's voiced are 0 and 3. But seriously, I think this is his best work yet. And yet he's still overshadowed by Nicholas Andrew Louis' performance as Obito. I love how he starts off doing the Madara voice when he's wearing the mask, but he goes into his usual higher pitched type of voice once the mask is destroyed. It shows just how large his range is that he could do such a good job with both for the same character who does exactly this. The only minor issue I have, and it really is minor, is that I don't like the way Padme looks in the illusion when Vader does break Obito's mask. It's just a little bit lower quality compared to the rest of the fight. Other than that, no notes. Great work. Is it bad when the second episode of a season completely overshadows the first? Maybe, but I'm not complaining.
Save this world, chosen warrior! Bring the fire!
let true dark be cast upon the world. Our Lord hath returned.
Remember how earlier I mentioned that Goku vs. Superman was an example of how far the research has come since the early days of Death Battle? Yeah, throw this into there as well, because I know this is not a fight that would have been done accurately if it were done in the first 3 seasons of the show. 2 RPG characters. Ben himself even admitted back in the day that he didn't know how to do scaling and stuff for RPG characters when it came to Final Fantasy. What chance did either of these two have back then? Longtime fans of my channel will know that this is an episode that Swan wanted to do for a while, and you can tell that this episode was one he was all too happy to work on. The writing in this fight was great, both getting the lore down in a way that was easy for outsiders like myself to understand, and throwing in little references that fans of either game would get. Even the sounds and animation had those references, which were sometimes on the more subtle side. What little voice acting there was in this episode was pretty good, be it from Liam's one line he got as the Chosen Undead, or from Tom Shock voicing both Darkstalker Cop and Kingseeker Prompt. Probably saying those characters' names incorrectly, but I'm not a Dark Souls fan, so... But my favorite part of this episode was the audio, especially the song Fireborn. Brandon's music abilities are great, but the fact that he got a bunch of people from the fanbase to actually form an official choir for this song, some of whom being people I've worked with on this channel that even I know who they are, is amazing. I don't know how many people in the fan choir have actually had training to sing, but regardless, they did great. Hell, they even released this song with just the fan choir on their own. Major props to everyone who is on this track, because y'all did a fantastic job. Really, there aren't any negatives on this episode. It's just that the top 2 managed to take the good stuff in this episode and make it even better. No shame in that, really. They just knew how to get good. Those of you who saw the update video from New Year's Day will know all the reasons I hadn't worked on a single video project for 2.5 years. But there was one reason I didn't disclose in that video that prevented me from making this video specifically. Because I had major plans for this video. Plans that were, admittedly, a little too ambitious for my own good, and that I decided you guys probably wouldn't want to see. And it all stems from this episode!
Well, it was worth a try. But still, I'm surprised you don't recognize your old home.
No. No!
Discord?
No. No! No, 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 no!
Oh, Bill.
No big deal. I've done this once already. Wanna make a deal?
Seriously, I had an entire plan on making reference to the promo of this season, having that cryptic puzzle that they used for the start. I was gonna have Bill, Cypher, and Discord interrupt me working on the production of this video, and it would have had the 3 of us screwing with each other, and I even had my friend Ricto ready and willing to voice Discord for this idea. However, there were 2 things that kept that from becoming reality. One was the real-world limitations. I would need to either animate either of the characters myself or pay someone else to do, neither of which were all that feasible. I'm not Ben. I don't have the confidence in myself to make animations for something like this, like he did with the show's early fights, and I don't have a lot of money. Not to mention, there was the technical difficulties with my hard drive, the stuff going on in my real life, interrupting production of this video. It just wasn't realistic. And the other reason why is because I felt it was a little too late 2000s, early 2010s internet reviewery something that Spoonie or AVGN would have made back in the day, and some of those videos were kinda cringe looking back on them in hindsight, so even though it would have fit the time period when these two shows were airing, I didn't think you guys would have wanted to see that. But that's fine, because it means I can talk about this episode normally and how awesome it is. There were so many good elements to this one, really. The voice acting was top-notch, with John Patino's voice for Bill sounding almost exactly like Alex Hirsch's voice, and Paul Guyette doing a great job sounding like John Delancey's voice for Discord. Actually, Paul's been a bit of an unsung hero for Season 10, voicing in 3 episodes in a row, starting with Silver Surfer, then Discord, and finally voicing Cole. Yet another voice actor who shows range on this show. Of course, if we're talking about audio, Discordant Decipher is a fantastic song to listen to. While Brandon isn't exactly able to do the perfect voice for Bill, he still does a great job singing from his perspective, though he nails down his laugh extremely well. Of course, Mr. Goatee probably steals the show for that song since he's singing from Discord's perspective, and also does a fantastic John Delancey impression. All of that, combined with the work of Infotron, did make it a creepy yet exhilarating tune. I haven't even touched on the animation or the writing, which are also phenomenal in their own rights. The fact that the animation switches back and forth so easily and looks great in each form is amazing. Hell, they even used puppets! I remember when that was just something Chad joked about them doing for a fight, and they did it here! It's like they were waiting for the opportunity to make this episode, but they weren't sure when they'd get that chance. To say nothing of the writing, when a death battle is written in such a way that it feels like an actual crossover that could be made, minus the idea of a character actually dying, you know that it's written well. And damn, that ending makes me tear up whenever I think about it. Discord lost the battle, but won the war, and as someone who's quite a fan of G4MLP myself, it went better than I expected. Throw in the tasteful, at least for these two characters, use of good fourth wall breaks, especially compared to most of Deadpool's appearances on this show, and you'd really think this episode should be the best, but, well, only one could top it. I'll be honest, this was kind of a tough call for me. Bill vs. Discord was a really, really good episode, and it probably could have topped this season. Hell, I'm sure for some of you, it did. But for me, there were just a few things I liked more with number 1. And really, the song says it itself. When it's all said and done, there can only be one.
Still standing? So we're both shackled to the dead. You foul beasts will not have his soul!
First and foremost, I feel like I need to address the fact that in the potential rematches episode we made just as Season 10 was about to start, we didn't mention Dimitri as a potential opponent for Guts. Honestly, I was thinking of that idea, but I didn't include it because of how much Marquez, Phil, and I all were writing with that episode that the idea fell through the cracks. Regardless, holy sh**! This episode was amazing! There was not a single thing done wrong for me with this episode. The voice acting was fantastic for both Guts and Dimitri. Of course it would be with Xander Mobus voicing a character as legendary as Guts, but no disrespect to Kevin Rivera voicing Dimitri, who had as good of a performance as Xander had. There was no shortage of fantastic line reads from the both of them. Which brings me to my next point. The writing was great as well. Admittedly, I don't think it was as great as Bill vs. Discord was, but it was still amazing. Hell, the research was even well done in my opinion, once again showing how far the team has come from when Guts fought Nightmare and won, despite Nightmare having the stat advantage in every category. This season really felt like the season where they wanted to get things right from the sins of their past, and there are so many episodes this season that showed it. God's Hand is also a really freaking good song, having lyrics we didn't get to hear in the episode. It's both intense and beautifully somber and respectful. I even love how the end of the song feels like it could have been either Guts or Dimitri acknowledging the struggles the other has been through and being supportive, regardless of who won. It's beautiful. But beauty? That's not what people come here to see. They came here to see a brutal, intense fight, and my God, did we get that with this animation! I love so much of the stuff that went into this animation, from the intense back and forth nature of the fight where it really seemed like either one could win until the very end, to the amount of blood spilled in this fight, just showing how brutal both of these characters could be. Hell, they even managed to put in the infamous clang sound effect from the 2016 Berserk anime to good use. The one that everyone who watched that show freaking hated, and yet here, it's put in perfectly. Seriously, there are no real notes about this, and it almost topped the previous two personal favorites that I've had for the show. But I suppose it'll have to settle for being, at the very least, in the top 5 of the show. And for being the best episode of Season 10. If I had managed to get around to making this video when I was supposed to, I probably would have used this part of the video to talk about how sad it was that we wouldn't be getting any more of the show thanks to Rooster Teeth's closing down. But thankfully, the show came back, this time under new management. Their own. How well did their first year or so of independence work out for them? Well, come back next time, and I'll answer that question for you.